Hi all you cave dwellers and welcome to the Cavern Podcast. The Cavern Club, the most famous club in the world. From the Beatles and the Stones to the Arctic Monkeys and Adele. Join us on our podcast for Cavern Conversations. Each episode we talk to a special guest with real Cavern connections. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Keats, and you're listening to Series 1, Episode 11. Liverpool. Liverpool is a music city. We all know that. From the initial Merseybeat explosion in the 60s to the second explosion in the late 70s, early 80s, the Liverpool music scene has always been vibrant and relevant. Today is no different, with so many Liverpool bands and artists breaking through to the mainstream, and lots more on the verge of doing so. Now, many of these bands are on the record label run by today's guest and would, at some point in their musical journey, would have performed at the festival which he started. So welcome to the Cavern Podcast, Dave Pichilingi. How you doing, Dave?
Nice to see you, John. Glad to be here.
Excellent. I was thinking about this before. I'm going to start. I want to get your take on this. As a good friend of ours, because that's the thing in Liverpool, is a good friend of ours, because we all know everyone, don't we? It's such a village.
Village in a city.
Absolutely. But a good friend of ours and another Liverpool legend, because, you know, you're a Liverpool legend. I'm a legend in my own haircut. That's about it. But another major legend in Liverpool, Mr. Billy Butler, former Cavern DJ, BBC presenter, the champion of everything. I've seen him describe you recently, probably in the last year, 2 years, and you're laughing because you've seen
he always calls it.
He calls you the new Brian Epstein.
He does, yeah.
What's your take on that?
Oh my good God! I mean, who wouldn't want to be called the new Brian Epstein? I mean, I take it with a pinch of salt. I take insults with a pinch of salt, and I take compliments with a pinch of salt. But it's very nice for Billy to say it. And you're right, he always says it. He says it online. He wishes me happy birthday as Mr. Epstein. And every time I see him, you know, and you're right, he really is a legend. You know, he's someone who supported bands, music. My first ever job in music when I was still at university, I was at Liverpool. It was called Liverpool Poly then. It's now John Moores University. And I worked on a program called Street Life with Janice Long. Yeah. And then it became with Jane Buchanan after that. That's how I first met Janice. And Billy, of course, was a legend in that building then. And I used to, he won't remember this, but I got his autograph for so many of my aunties and uncles and me mum, because, of course, he was doing Hold Your Plums at the time.
Oh, yeah, well, that was huge.
Which was massive. And so, I was in awe of him then. And just as someone who was amazing on the radio, really, the way he could connect with people. He was fantastic, really, of getting that Liverpool way across. So, from the very start of my career through to now, Billy's become a good friend, I guess, over the years. But to be compared to that is fantastic, you know.
So I know you through Sound City, through Modern Sky and all that. But I also know, like myself, you're a few years older than me. You started off in a band yourself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been saying this to everyone because, I was speaking to Billy Bob Thornton on one of the episodes, and his musical journey absolutely started with the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. That was where did it start for you?
Where did my journey with the Beatles start?
No, with
where did my musical journey start?
Why are you?
Well, I think, growing up where we grew up, like everyone else, I couldn't box, So what am I going to do? I found out very quickly I was pretty crap at football.
Yeah.
I love football, and I took it as far as I could take it. And so the next obvious choice, particularly in the time I grew up, because I grew up during punk.
Yeah, I was going to say late 70s.
Was to get in a band, So I got in a band like a lot of us did during those times. And this is how bad I was at punk. I was too lazy to even learn 2 chords. So I decided I was a singer.
Yeah, that's
it was a bit
lazy.
like Captain Manor and deciding he was a captain and just self-appointing it. I just decided when I found out with the other mates who were all 14, 15 at the time, I'll be the singer. It seemed like the easiest way in to be in a rock and roll star.
And you get the girls as well if you sing.
Absolutely, yeah. So that was my dream, and that was my dream for a long time. I was in bands from when I was 14, 15 years of age until I lost my last record deal when I was 29 years of age.
Okay.
So I was in bands called Wake Up Africa. And then I was in a band called 35 Summers. We signed to RCA with that band, and I toured and kind of begun to understand how the business worked as well at that time. It was also because no one would manage us. I fell into the world of management, and I found out I was good at that. I managed the farm for a good period of time. Through when we set up Produce Records, I helped set up the whole Produce label and so on. So I was playing about. I was thinking I was a rock and roll star, but I was playing about with the business side of it at the same time because I had to.
Yeah, well, if you haven't got a manager to do it, somebody's got to take, because
Absolutely.
it's the music business for a reason.
And I gravitated towards that position, and so when I hung my boots up of trying to be a rock star, when I eventually decided at the tender age of 29, I wasn't going to do that. I decided I was in love with being in the music business. I also didn't know anything else, being absolutely truthful. And so I just found to carve a way through it all, really,
So from that first band, what was the first move? Was it Produce?
No, the first band I was in was a band called Wake Up Africa, and we actually signed a small record deal with a guy called Tim Hudson. Tim Hudson himself had the most amazing story. Tim was a guy that had reckoned he'd invented flower power and the peace thing, which his story was very compelling. But his story brings us back to Matthew Street.
Okay.
Because Tim, his dad was a very rich textiles guy from Manchester, and he used to come to Liverpool selling the textiles to different places in Liverpool. And he used to drink round the corner in a cafe, and he got to meet the Beatles.
Okay.
And so he met the Beatles, and his journey was, going on. They got to know him as the rich man, he said, because them and other bands, because he had money. So he'd buy everyone a coffee or a tea, whatever they were buying. And he bumped into them again when he was going to Hamburg. Now, he might have flowered this story, but the story's amazing. He bumped into them again when he went to Hamburg. And he said, "Where are you going?" He said, "Oh, we're going to Hamburg." And he thought, "I'm working for me old fella. Dude, I don't enjoy this." So he went to France, did all this stuff in France, came back. The Beatles were now big. And he decided, he invented the title Lord Tim Hudson. And he went to live in LA and told everyone he was a lord. Got a job on...
It sounds like he should be from Liverpool, by the way.
I know.
That's
a
classic
man.
Liverpool black.
And they worked for some radio station. They all had KRCWX. Went to work for the station, told them he knew the Beatles. And then when the Beatles first came over, his boss went, "Right, get on that tour." And so from his days of being down Matthew Street, he'd not really seen them in or out of things. And so he found out the restaurant they were in New York, booked a table at that restaurant, walked over to the table while they were there and said, was just about to introduce them. The guy who was minding them at the time was pushing him back. And John Lennon, as he tells it, says, "It's the Mank. Come here and sit down." And he sat him down. He said, got talking. He said, "You've got to save my life here. I've told everyone I'm a lord. I'm not." He said, "I've told everyone you're my best mate." He said, "So I need to get on this tour." And he got on the first Beatles tour of America. And he's got all these amazing photos around his house of him interviewing all of them with a ewer. Tim Hudson, Lord Tim Hudson.
That's
he
incredible.
did all of these things. He married in the end. What's the other crooner? Not Frank Sinatra, the other crooner, sang "Little Old Wine Drinker Me."
Dean Martin.
He married Dean Martin's daughter, and he played one of the vultures in the Jungle Book. His story's unbelievable.
Bizarre.
We're talking about everyone else except me today, but this guy was, I guess he was a catalyst for changing things, because he gave me my first record deal. I was introduced to him from... he's no longer with us, Rob Gretton, who managed Joy Division and New Order. So Rob was a bit of a fan of Wake Up Africa. He introduced us to this guy, and he started managing us. And then we ended up playing these parties at this big land that he had in the middle of Cheshire. and eating loads of magic mushrooms off his land. And I met Jeremy Lascelles, who was at the time the head of Virgin, because he loved cricket, because this guy loved cricket as well. He managed Ian Botham as well as us.
Really? Beefy.
Anyway, so he put out our first single, which he, didn't do anything. Became big in Japan many years later.
I remember the name of the band.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I
And then
if
we
I saw
split up,
you.
and then 35 Summers gone. I was then managing the farm, and then I got produced together. And then because I knew a lot of people and did it right, we ended up getting signed by RCA.
I mean, a huge success
Story
with
of
the farm.
Simpleton's fantastic, and it brings us right back here.
Well, it does bring us back to Matthew Street, but also, are you like me? Are you of the Eric's era? Were you going to the...
Yeah, very much so.
So, I mean, I got the tail... I think I'm 4 years younger than you.
Yeah.
I got the tail end of it. I used to go to matinees. So I
went to matinees, yeah.
Well, I saw Joy Division for 50p.
I never saw Joy Division at the Eric's, no. I never saw them. Saw the March of the Mods tour with Madness and the Specials. Saw Skids, saw XTC. Oh my goodness! I saw a lot of acts during that time. Yeah, I saw Joy Division supporting the Buzzcocks at the Mountford Hall. Ian Curtis fell off the stage.
It's not a bad gig, is it?
It was great. Yeah.
But it's interesting because when we talk about like the Cavern's history, the Cavern closed 73, moved over the road, and changed. It's lasted like less than 2 years. It became the Revolution Club, and then Cavern Enterprise leased to the guys from Eric's.
That's right.
And that became Eric's. And the irony was the whole punk thing was, the Beatles were passé at that point. Nobody in Liverpool was really talking about the Beatles because the hindsight hadn't kicked in. And it was like...
Well, there was the story, wasn't there? The further you got away from Liverpool, the bigger the Beatles became.
Yeah.
That was the thing at the time. And I think because we'd had it rammed down our throats by our aunties and uncles, and you just reject what they tell you is cool.
Well, this is our time.
You had to come back to the Beatles.
The irony is, I always look at this when we look at our history and we look at all those the famous Eric sign at the bottom of it. It's got Cavern Enterprises. Because it was leased from Cavern Enterprises.
Yes, that's right.
So the irony is,
that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, because you got all these kids, all these punks rebelling against the Beatles and the Cavern. It's all Cavern Enterprises. And we always say, and it's almost like a wind-up, well, the Cavern carried on trading all the way through that.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was leased by...
I love those little stories, those little vignettes.
It's always at the bottom of that. But Eric's was, I always say Eric's was my Cavern. So it sounds like it was your Cavern.
It was, and I think people like Roger Eagle really with the vision. And again, all of this is about love of music that we're talking about, isn't it? And about individuals. There's many women we can talk about as well, but Roger Eagle was another kind of Scouse invader, really, wasn't he? Because he came from the other end of the M62 and created, with Pete Fulwell, and created, an amazing thing in Eric's, really,
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. Matthew Street at the time, it's strange now the way we're looking at it and, where we are now, and the no one really cared about the Beatles back in there and what it is now, which is this whole real industry and everything's built around it. And Matthew Street's everything's busy. It was a grim place then.
It was.
But Matthew Street itself, on a Saturday afternoon, there were, those matinees there was no more exciting place in Liverpool.
No, there wasn't. Well, there was 3 destinations, wasn't there? There was of course Eric's, Probe,
yeah,
and the Armadillo.
Yeah, and there was also Extremes, the clothes shop as
Extremes as well with the going downstairs. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
But I think where we are now recording this podcast, the original Armadillo was next door to us, I think.
Was, yeah.
And then it moved to where we are now.
That's right.
So it was this whole thing. But even though it was grim, it was the 80s, it was exciting.
It's weird when you look back at those photos because they look really grim, don't they? But at the time, it didn't feel exciting, grim. It just felt so
Especially if you had your bondage, the colours going on, your bondage kecks and all that. So, we are that old and we go back to that. Exciting. And that whole explosion of music that came out of that. So moving on, so the farm, what was the next move after the farm? It was...
Well, the farm went on to, they carried, because I signed to RCA, so I left that role of working at Produce because I became a full-time rock and roll star, just sucking as much money out of the RCA system as we could.
Absolutely.
So I got to do my own bit of traveling and touring and so on. But then, like 9 out of 10 bands, not just them, but now, it didn't happen. We were dropped. And I decided to stay in the business. So I kind of gravitated towards management because I knew I was good at that. I was a good connector. I knew I was a good connector. It goes back to what you said at the very beginning, really. You know, I've done a lot of things. I know probably a lot about every area of this music business, but I don't consider myself a specialist. I remember David Bowie saying, I'm a generalist, not a specialist, and that kind of thing. Well, if that's good enough for Bowie, it's good enough for me.
We'll come back to Bowie as well, because that's part of your story.
So it was my first venture into professional management was when I first got dropped. And I managed a number of acts. The most successful, I guess, was a band called Sub Sub, who we had a number one single with a song called Ain't No Love. We sold like 3.5 million copies of the single. And then we made an album with the female vocalist who was on the first single, wouldn't make the album with us. And so we couldn't give the album away. But that was with Rob Gretton again, who I talked about just earlier. So Rob still managed New Order. His offices were based in the Hacienda then. And so we signed, Sub signed to Rob's records, because Rob and Tony Wilson had just sold factory records to London Records. And Rob didn't want to do it, but he needed the money because everyone was skint. You know, factory was in a deep hole at that time. And so the first thing that Rob did when he sold factory records to London Records, the day after, he started a label called Manchester Records and Rob's Records. And Rob's Records was for his more dance music, and Manchester Records was for his guitar bands. So I worked with two bands during that time. One was Sub Sub, and the other one I was associated with my friend Simon Duffy, who I've worked with forever, was a band called Kill Laura as well. I remember them, both signed to that label, or to Rob's label, you know. And I learned a lot of Rob. And it was also my first introduction to Tony Wilson as well at that time.
Yeah, I mean,
who I ended up working with as well.
Yeah, I mean,
for a number of years.
He was such a little linchpin in the whole scene, wasn't he?
Yeah, a real maverick, Tony. You know, and again, someone who, you know, lines that everyone would know, but don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Really,
Absolutely.
And perception is everything. Reality means nothing, and all those things. But I love that kind of flamboyancy.
Yeah, it is the maverick,
and so a lot of those things I learned. Listened to Tony, particularly. I didn't work with him on Factory because it was later because that had gone. But I worked with Tony on a thing called In the City with Phil Sachs, who's also been a great ally and a great friend throughout the years. So Phil was the original A&R guy from Factory Records, who was now A&R in the City, and I ended up re-meeting Phil again because I did some teaching at Lipper when that first opened.
Okay, so
I taught on the management degree there. So Phil then brought me in to also work on In the City with Tony Wilson.
I mean, I'm starting to see your path and your journey, and it's all leading up nicely to the next. Presumably, what was the next move, which was eventually Sound City. But were you always based in the north, pretty much?
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I did the Modern Sky deal, which we'll talk about later, there's a story about that makes it firmly in the north. But I've always believed in the north. My ethos now, I didn't know it was what it was then because I was too young to realize what it was. But what I've come to realize is 30 square miles where we are right now. I mean, we're at the heartbeat center of it here. This is kind of, we might as well be in Gracelands, mightn't we, being where we are right now. Is the epicenter of it. But 30 square mile, if you take a kind of wave that goes out from this, taking in Manchester as well, you've got a population of 2.5 million people.
Mm.
And probably some of the greatest musical output in the last 60, 70 years has come from that city. Now, that's not even a third of the size of New York. It's not even a quarter of the size of LA, Paris, Berlin, whatever. Our output it's unheard of.
It's ridiculous.
And I would say it's better than LA because per capita and per what it's made for the industry, I mean, the Beatles cast a big shadow in terms of the money, but still, there's a lot of other big ones in there as well. It's huge.
Yeah.
And so why would you be anywhere else?
Yeah.
Why would you know if you're a farmer and you're looking to kind of grow your produce from where it is, you're in the field, you're right next to the field. Why be in London?
No, absolutely.
You don't need to be. This is where, particularly for guitar bands and guitar music, which is my love, that's my passion. So I've always been in the North, and I've always resisted. I'm in London every week, but I resisted living there.
Yeah.
Because I love living in Liverpool. I love being in the North. I love the humour. I love the way of life. Everything about it really, suits me. But I was spending a lot of time in Manchester during that part of my career, really,
But I mean, what their musical story at that time, I mean, it was the competition between Liverpool and, I mean, it's always been there on every level. But that musically, but I'd be like you as a punter. I'd be in Manchester at gigs all the time, and
we got the train all the time.
Affleck's Palace all the time. It was almost like it's part. It's weird because of that rivalry.
Yeah,
but it was natural in that musical period. I'd be in Affleck's Palace buying me Joy Division overcoats and walking around. It's such the influence of that.
Affleck's was superb. My daughter loves Affleck's now. My daughter, our Emily, she's a fan of one of our bands, Crawlers, and she's adopted this goth lifestyle now. She's become like a goth, and I love it because I love identity. Yeah. I mean, you were a mod. But you're saying you were also into your Joy Division stuff and everything. And we flipped.
I was the original.
I was
crazy.
A Bowie thing. I was mod. I was a punk. I was everything.
I was a crazy mixed up kid. It sounds like you. I'll give you an example of that. Just being a music fan, but also that identity and like a style. When I was doing, I remember going to Eric's to a matinee to see one of my favourite bands, The Undertones.
Oh, yeah.
Used to love
Carl Hunter and you.
Oh, God, I used to love Mickey Bradley, the bass player, because I was a bass player. He always came out and chatted. It was a classic one of when they got their big hit, their next gig was The Empire, and you went and it was like, we've lost our band. But I remember going to the Undertones.
My mate signed him, Seymour Stein.
Yes.
Great story about how he signed them, and he went over to sign them.
All right. Well, I remember one time seeing them coming out of the Eric's, covered in spit and sweat and all that. And me and my mate Brian were huge Roxy Music fans as well. So we went, and they were playing the Empire, and we went in our punk gear. We were about 14 or something in our, plazzy leather kecks and our bum. And we sat
You
round.
went early, weren't you? Because I didn't see Roxy. That's amazing.
Yeah. So we went round to the Empire where they were playing.
Yeah.
And the loading at the back of the theatre by Mar Edges.
Yeah.
We just sat there behind there listening to the whole gig.
You didn't have tickets?
No, we didn't have any tickets.
Wow.
And we were hiding always because we were like these young punks.
Yeah.
But secretly we were like, dance away. It was
amazing.
But crazy mixed up. Then we became Smoothies.
We all became Smoothies, with our wedges.
Yeah, that's all that.
You could still have a wedge. I couldn't have a wedge anymore.
Smoothie. I remember a mate of mine going home, Dally, who used to be in Pele. Remember Pele?
Yeah.
I remember him going into his mum and saying, Mum, I want to be a smoothie. It's just pathetic. Identity.
Little box leather jackets and all that kind
But it's
of stuff.
identity, and I think it's hand in hand with music.
We did 4 Peel sessions.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Going back to the Billy Butler thing of Champion, because I don't know if you remember 35 Summers, we had that very famous Bill Shankly t-shirt, which I still sell. I must have sold about 250,000 of those shirts.
I do see it popping up every so often, yeah.
And though, so Shankly became, John Peel became a big fan of the shirt. And so I've still got a load of postcards from John. He used to write to me whenever he wanted a new one. And he'd say, what, have I got to give you another John Peel session? He said, to get another shirt.
Well, I read something the other day. I don't know who it was. It might have been Ian McNabb or something that said, apparently, I wish I knew who it was. I was reading it and he said, we were told that the way to get a Peel session was buy him a curry.
Yeah.
And someone said
he was bribable.
Yeah, so they went round and bought him a curry and found out where he was and took the curry around and they got a Peel session.
Of course, yeah, you would. I think he liked the humour of things, John.
Yeah,
he liked all of that kind of, you're having a go in a more innovative way than just sending me the music.
Yeah, I think that was the time, wasn't it? I remember our kid doing that one, getting their Peel session and just sending them quirky things.
Yeah. Yep.
So Sound City, that was. I mean, that's the first major one that I think just had such an impact on
back in Liverpool. Yeah, exactly. So I guess just before that, to put into some kind of context, Tony, I'd worked on In the City for probably 10 years, and Tony sadly got very ill, with cancer that eventually killed him, and so it got to about 2006, and it was plainly obvious that Tony was not going to get it really any better and be involved, because he was in the city, that flamboyancy we talked about. He'd bounce into the room, darlings, and all this, and so it lost some of that. So it lost its flagship person. But the other thing that had happened, interestingly, was there was another festival that used to come to in the city all the time, because it used to attract a lot of business people from all around the world, and other festivals. And these Americans used to come over from an event called South by Southwest.
Of course.
And we used to go, what's South by Southwest? You know, they were like the new kids on the block. It's in Austin, Texas. We hadn't even heard of Austin. We knew where Texas was, but we hadn't heard of Austin. And so we kind of dismissed them, you know. Yeah. And then eventually it bubbled. And in 2006, I went over to South by Southwest. I was managing a band at the time called the Aeroplanes, and I got them onto South by, and I took them over, and I was blown away. I thought, this is the new model. This is the way it should be.
Because it was business as well as music, wasn't it?
Which in the city was, by the way, but it was subtly different. Because what happened within the city was, about putting on 54 of what we would consider to be the best unsigned bands from around the world. A lot of them from the north, but around the world. But what happened was MySpace came along. And so all the bands announced on MySpace, we're playing in the city, and played the music. And so all the A&R people stopped coming to Manchester because
it was accessible.
There was no reason for them to come to Manchester anymore. So the audience figures were going down. South by Southwest was bubbling up. And Tony, sadly, was very ill. So it was like a perfect storm. So I came back. And so in 2006 was my last year of doing in the city. And I spoke to Yvette. Tony sadly died then as well. And I spoke to Yvette, who was his partner. And I said, look, I'm going to have a go at setting something else up. I know you'll see it as in competition to you, but it's not. I'm going to position it at the other end of the year, because in the city happened in October. I'll go in May. So it said, we'll compliment you. She wasn't very happy at the time. We're good friends now, but at the time she wasn't. She said Tony would have called me a very rude word.
Yeah,
and I said, Tony used to always call me that very rude word. But
he always took it as a compliment,
It was a term of endearment almost, yeah. So that was why I started it. It was copying South by Southwest in many ways, you know, to have a go with that. But we were the first, you know, now that everywhere, we're 17 years deep now. And you know, so that was that was the rationale for it. And it was about championing, because what I found out about Austin and Texas and South by was about championing Austin music. So I said, I'm going to champion music from the north, first and foremost, but with bands coming from everywhere else. So that's what we've always tried to do, really, you know, with Sound City. It's been a, you know, we've bounced it all over the place.
You had a lot of names that have played over the years, Sound City, that have gone on to be huge.
Yeah.
Ed Sheeran was there earlier.
50 quid I paid for Ed Sheeran, you know, for 2 shows.
For 2 shows as well?
2 shows. He did a matinee and an evening show, yeah. Yeah, and you know what, he was great. I think I always remember being in where the kind of Boneyard was that year. And I think because he'd done 2 shows, he wanted 2 riders. And I think he'd only been left 1 rider. So I think the rider was 12 cans of lager. And I remember his manager, who still works with him to this day, you know, done an amazing job there. But what a lovely kid. And he came up and almost apologetically said, we're doing 2 shows. Could we get 24 cans instead of 12 because we're doing 2 shows? And they looked at me and I went, give him another 12 cans. Like, you know, I knew nothing about him at the time. I don't claim to, really, you know. I remember them shows being really exciting and bumper.
Yeah.
But, you know, lots of Florence and the Machine. We'd done the 1975 in Tony Butler's place, you know, the Zanzibar, Jungle. Oh, my God, the list goes on. You know, there's a lot of, like you know, you've got such a wall of fame.
Yeah.
I like to think with what Sound City's done, we've helped a lot of people along the way, a lot of artists from Liverpool as well. And also helped a lot of people to the business as well.
Well, absolutely. But the Liverpool aspect of it, I mean, we sponsored Sound City as the Cavern for a few years, and I think it was always the emerging talent stage, which brought it right back to, you know, the Cavern. This the thing. The Cavern has always encouraged new artists, because the Beatles were in new artists writing their own stuff, and that continues. So that link up with us was important.
Absolutely.
You know, it's quite Sound City for us.
I think we even did one when we went, because do you remember we went on the docks?
On the dock.
And we recreated this.
Yeah.
Which I love that. I remember them. I've got such fond memories of that, because in them years, I remember we put on a load of bands from South Korea and other places on the Cavern stage that year, which was amazing, because they, you know, obviously these bands are coming from all around the world, and when they find out they're playing the Cavern stage, they're hugely disappointed when they're not playing the Cavern.
The Cavern stage.
Because they were playing they were playing the stage on the dock.
They had a picture of it.
But they were
on the
made
back.
up when they had this behind them,
No, it was a good pop-up there. But that was from bringing it back to, the Cavern. And we've changed over the years the perception of the Cavern. And it's that we've now got that lovely balance between celebrating the heritage and encouraging the next generation.
Yeah, you've done a great job of it. I talked about our artist Jamie Webster. He's a huge fan. But I think the generation of younger artists coming through now, that perception's gone. That you can't. I think it's perceived as a cool venue. It's the right place to do.
We've sort of worked hard at that. I would say in the last 15.
I think Dave Monks has helped with that.
Yeah,
as
Dave
well,
Monks' BBC Introducing's been huge. Sound City's been huge. Tying up with even like stuff we do with Lipper.
Yeah.
Because there's obvious
Lipper's
relevance.
such a great breeding ground for artists.
It is. We're going there next year as part of the Beatle Week Festival, which we're taking on like probably 1,500 international Beatle fans for it, and we're taking over a day.
Taking over Lipper?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
On the Friday at Beatle Week. We did it years ago, before, it's more than 15 years ago, it's before I got involved. And we haven't been able to do it because they're never open in the summer. Anyway, we're taking them over there, and Paul and I went over for a little recce the other day. And my lads just finished Lipper sixth form, so I've seen what the great work they do there. But I haven't been to Lipper for years. It's unbelievable what they've got there.
You've got to give some credit to Mark Featherstone Whitty. He gets some kind of bad PR, but what a vision he had for that.
I always got on
and he was
Mark,
invader coming really,
he's proper
posh
lovey,
kid.
He's proper lovey.
He was, yeah.
But I liked that because I was an actor. I quite like the lovey.
But what a great story Lipper is. It's fantastic, really.
And it keeps growing and growing, and the facilities, and it's. Well, we were saying to Sean, who took over from Mark, there's so many options when you go to Lipper, and you might go in thinking, well, I want to do this in the industry, and he was saying it's absolutely, by the end of it, you've gone down a completely different route, but within the industry, because there are so many options now within the music business to go through, and that is such a melting pot of influence. And
it is. It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
So all these tie-ins, and we used to sponsor the Q Awards. We went
a couple of great nights there.
Yeah, we had a few sherbets one
Dave
year.
Jones as well was out in those days.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, so all that is important, but I think what you've done for Liverpool artists and the city as a festival, which it continues to this day, and it's evolved. It continues to evolve. Sound City, doesn't it?
I think that's I think because I learned that in the city, because in the city never evolved. So I learned a lesson. You've not got to be frightened of change, and you've almost, when it's at its most successful, break it.
Yeah,
have the bravery to break it and start again. And so when we were 4 years deep, and we really built our audience to loving what we were doing in the city at that time, taking over car parks and everything else we were doing, we stopped and moved to the docks, and it was, it was a fortune to do it. It nearly broke me, if I'm being absolutely honest. It took investments to keep me.
It was just before where Everton's going to be, isn't it?
It was on where I had the lease for that land.
Okay.
Everton took the lease off me.
Well, thank God they did as a blue. Because you wouldn't have let it happen, would you?
No, well, but to be honest, I was made up. But we used to make, that was good business for me, because we could lease it to, Peaky Blinders would lease it.
I didn't know you had the lease on it.
Yeah, we had the lease on the whole land and on the sheds with a couple of other friends. Yeah.
I remember how many years did you do there? Was it 2?
3.
3
years.
Remember weren't you taking people from the Titanic hotel through the docks?
Yes, we did them on a dock walk. Yeah, that's right.
That's great. I love it.
It was weird because we had what's John's son, Sean.
Yeah.
Sean, because we had Sean playing on those docks one time, and he's the spit of his alpha. Oh my God, the eyes. So Sean said to me, Dave, can you walk me round the docks, and all this kind of stuff. I said, yeah, sure, with his wife, his girlfriend at the time, he's now married to. So the pair of them was walking them around the docks and showing him, talking about things, and he goes, I can feel my father, I can feel my dad here, and all this. I said, sound, but he was so intense, and maybe he could, but he was what a guy, and he was such a great fan, that he ended up kind of, because he introduced me to a few other people to make a few other things happen at that time, but he was a great fan of what we were doing with Sound City as well, when I met him again at South by Southwest, interesting enough.
Oh, really?
So they were playing, and it was Mark McNulty, Mark McNulty, the photographer.
Of course,
So Mark McNulty said, I said, I want to go and see Sean Lennon. I want to meet him because I want to invite him to Sound City, see if we can get him over. So I was watching him. Mark McNulty went round the back of the speakers to take photos at the side of the stage. He had a photo pass. It was outside venue in a big park. And then as Mark is walking back, I just seen him fall over. I said, what'd you do there? And he came back laughing. He goes, did you see me fall over then? I said, yeah. He said, I was walking backwards to get the shot. He said, there was a woman sat there, with her legs up listening to the band. I fell over there. Said, oh, sorry, love, and all this gets up. He said, it was Yoko Ono.
No.
Tripped over Yoko because she didn't want to be seen at the front. She was listening to
she's only little,
tiny. And Mark fell over Yoko when he was getting a photo of her son.
Oh, that's funny, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Remember Yoko came to the Cavern? It was like when they launched the educational bus with the recording studio.
That's right, yeah.
And we did the after show and provided some of the music for the thing down at the museum, and she came to the Cavern that night. There's a whole story attached to that, but that was like Beatle royalty come to the Cavern.
Yeah.
And she was lovely. She was really lovely. And the first thing she did, talking of you being Brian Epstein, just as she came in from the
Keep
car.
saying that.
So Mr. Epstein.
Becomes the truth in the end if you say it.
Yeah, we'll say it enough times, yeah. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. So as we walked in, me and Dave Jones welcomed her, and, she said, and as she walked in to go into the dressing room, which we'd rechristened as the green room, and I put loads of plants in there and softly, it looked lovely. She saw there's a lovely picture of Brian Epstein that is now currently next to the front stage, but it used to be as you went into the dressing room, the live lounge. And she saw this picture, and it's just him, just wistfully, just sitting at the side. And she stopped and said, "What a lovely picture of Brian that is." And she was lovely, and it's great to be there. Beatles royalty. We're going to go to the next move, which was Modern Sky. Because you're still obviously involved in Sound City.
Yeah.
I know.
But
Yeah, but Becky's running
Becky's RMD, who's been with me for 15 years, Becky.
Yeah, she's brilliant.
She was the best find I ever did.
Yeah.
That's what I'm good at, picking teams.
Yeah.
That's my skill, I think.
Bit like Shankly.
Yes.
Going back to Shankly.
I'm a good connector, like I said.
Yeah.
I'm good at that.
I think that's important, though, isn't it? I mean, Bill Heckle here, I would say, he picked me, or did he pick me, or was I forced upon him? I don't know. But if he was sitting there, he's arrogant enough to say, "Yeah, I picked them all, and I got the." But it is knowing people that are going to fit in and going to get your vision. That's important. So, Modern Sky came along in 2016.
Yeah, I think go back a little from that. So when we moved to the docks, as I said, it cost a lot of money to scale that up because it wasn't as cheap as doing a festival in the city. So at that time, I was looking for investors because I couldn't afford to do it. And I spoke to a number of people, and I spoke to James Barton. James Barton's been a great friend, James from Cream. And James at that time had just done a deal to sell shares, he'd sold a portion of Cream to a company called Ingenious Media. And Ingenious Media were famous for investing in lots of films. And what they were doing was basically taking lots of people's wealthy people's money, and instead of investing it into oil or rocks or whatever it might be, these people wanted to be a bit more creative with the money. So they wanted to invest in films and music and festivals. So Cream was one of the festivals they'd invested in, and James said, you should meet these people. He said, I think they'd like Sound City. So I went to meet them in London, and they decided to invest into Sound City. And so that allowed us to scale it. That was why I could move it to the docks. I had money at last, we had money, but I didn't have that much money to do that. So I sold 25% of it to Ingenious Media. And I was with them for 3 years. But the problem was they hated me and I hated them because I was dealing daily with Deloitte and Touche accountants, really. And I've got to be honest, you always take the positives. I learned so much about business from working with them. But it was too ruthless. And I just felt it was my stress levels went up, everything went up.
You were losing the fun. The fun had gone.
The fun of it had gone, exactly. And so I needed another investor. I needed someone to buy them out because I couldn't afford to buy them out personally because it was worth a lot more now. And so I was looking for another investor, and I mentioned him earlier, but a great lifelong friend, or the friend from when I was in my mid-20s until he sadly died, was Seymour Stein.
Yeah.
And Seymour had been a friend and a mentor. I knew my family and I knew his family for many years. And so I said to Seymour, who do you think, I need to get rid of these investors. I can't afford to buy them out, and so on. I was kind of half hoping Seymour would bail us out at the time, but he was very good with his money, Seymour, but he was a good connector. And he goes, why are you looking west? Look east. He said, there's this amazing company in China called Modern Sky. This kid who's running it is superb. When I say kid, he's a little bit younger than me, probably about your age. And I said,
thanks for that. I'm officially now a kid. I'll take that. Carry on.
Well, to Seymour, we were all kids, And so he said, I'll get you an introduction. So he got me an introduction. I still knew nothing about Modern Sky. I was, they were doing a festival in Helsinki, and the guy, Shenli Wei, who's the CEO of Modern Sky in China, invited me via his people. I didn't have people. He just spoke to, his people spoke to me and said, would you like to come to Helsinki? He would like to talk to you about, your company Sound City. So I said, okay. And so I said to my wife, Rebecca, I said, this guy's flying me out to Helsinki. I've never been to Helsinki before. I'll go meet him. It's got to be worth it. Seymour's introduced me to them. So I went, and we had a conversation like this. And this guy from New York who was working for him at the time said, Dave, just make your pitch to Shenli Wei. And so, I can talk, so I talked for about an hour, just trying to excite him, all the things. And he knew I'd worked with Tony and Rob Gretton and various other people. So he knew a lot about me. He'd done his research. He'd done more research on me than I'd done on him. And then that night we had dinner together. Oh, that was it. At the end of the meeting, he went to meet Spotify, whoever he's meeting, because he had a lot of important meetings. And I said, how do you think that meeting went? And this guy went, that went fantastic. And I went, how much of that do you think he'll have understood? He goes, he'll have got about 10% of that.
10%.
I said, I'm shattered. He's got 10%. He goes, no, but it's the Chinese way. He's going to decide if he likes you or if he doesn't like you. He's already knows about the business. Anyway, we had dinner that night. And he looked at me and he goes, Dave, I want to do the deal with you. And I said, it's like Monty Python scene, waiting to haggle or discuss it. He said, no, I'm not going to haggle it. He said, if I can buy it off them cheaper, you're happy. He said, because that's not going to affect our deal. I'm going to invest all the money into Sound City that you want. I'm not going to haggle on it. He said, but if I can buy off their share off them cheaper, it doesn't matter to you, doesn't affect you. I said, that's fine. He got it a lot cheaper in the end. He haggled really well. We had good business people to do it for him. And that's how the deal was done. It was done literally 1 hour meeting. The guy understood 10% of what I said. And it was done on a handshake. Lawyers got in the way for 3 months and the deal was done. And he only said to me, it's a bit like Godfather, he said, the only proviso I have is I want you to run Modern Sky outside of China. And I said, what does that mean? And he goes, I don't know yet. He said, but I want you to come to China and see Modern Sky. And so he flew me to Beijing early that next year. And then I saw how big Modern Sky was in China. This guy had created a festival business that did 1 million tickets a year in China. He had a platform called Now, Modern Sky Now, 42 million subscribers on it. It was like the pipeline to the youth of China. Yeah. He'd been in bands himself. His punk rock moments, his Cavern moments, if you want, was when Wham played Beijing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Even though he didn't get a ticket, but he said that changed everything for him.
That was a big deal.
Big moment.
It?
Yeah. It was. What was the name of the manager at the time? His name will come to me in a second. But it was amazing.
Simon Napier Bell, was it?
Yeah, it was Simon Napier Bell. You're right, Simon Napier Bell. And so he said that was our moment. And he said, so I started Modern Sky just to put my own records out. He said no one would buy the records. So he said I started a magazine called Modern Sky and I gave the record or the CDs away free.
I do that as well.
Yeah, well, and then he said, but within 2 months we had like doing 3.5 million copies a week. It's phenomenal. And that's how he got his music to people. And then he signed all his mates' bands and all this kind of stuff. And he's created this behemoth. It's now the largest independent entertainment company in China. And Seymour introduced me to this guy. My life went boof to east. I now love.
I mean, I always see, on Facebook stuff, you're always over there, aren't you?
Well, I was pre-COVID. I
right.
go maybe twice a year now, yeah.
It was a lot before that then,
It was
wasn't
maybe 4 times a year then. And now, if I'm being honest, you know, we started Modern Sky as a label because that's what he decided in the end he wanted to do. And that, going back to what we said before, so he said, so I want you to do a label. He said, so I need to get you a home for your family in London. I said, I'm not moving to London. I said, everything you knew about me, what I've done, it's in the north. And he goes, but it's only 200 miles. I said, but that's a long way in there, the UK. You know, they had no sense of that being a difference. I said, you know, there's a world of difference.
Game changer.
That. Yeah. And so he trusted me. He said, okay, do it in Liverpool. And so we did it. He invested money for the first 2 years. We sent a 10-year plan because I said, you're not going to break even with this for 10 years. We broke even in our 3rd year, and now we make a lot of money every year. You know, and it was, you know, I think we've assembled a great team with Modern Sky. You know, and it's built really, really quickly.
So for, I mean, I know the artists that have gone through your doors who were there. You know, name some of the bands that you've helped to get to that point, and in some cases established bands that you've been able to bring back.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, that at the very start of it, those bands like Slow Readers Club that we brought, who did really well for us in the early days. A band called The Blinders did very well for us in the early days. But then I guess our second phase of acts that we come through, we had acts like Red Rum Club. Yeah. The Lathams, who we put the first album out, we now manage them. They're signed to Island Records. Crawlers, who signed to Polydor, but we manage them. Yeah. And I'll explain how we want to change that going forward. Jamie Webster, who I met on the plane going to Madrid because Sound City was doing the stage in Madrid. And even though you're a blue eye, that was the only way of me getting a ticket to go and advise as a production person. Good God, I don't know anything about production. But anyway, that was when I met Jamie, and thankfully I was on that plane together. More recently, we signed Miles Kane to us. Mick Head gave Mick Head his first ever top 10 album.
I know, unbelievable.
You know,
a great album as well.
And many more. You know, I'm going to miss a lot of it. Royston Club, Rhiann Downey, Brooke Combe. Yeah. You know, we've got some really strong artists and a real strong stable of artists coming through for the next 2 or 3 years. Really, I
always think it comes across as a supportive network of, like, it's, you know, we said before about Liverpool being a village. I mean, all these artists are connected, and there is a real scene in the city, even though we're losing grassroots venues, you know, all the time. There still is a healthy scene out there. And
oh God, you know, you go to other cities around the world, there's still music going on every night in this city, really. You know, it's you go to much bigger cities and they're like funeral parlours after 10 o'clock, really, you know. Liverpool is truly a music city. And I'd like to think what you're doing, what we're doing, it's breathing life into the future of that, really, making sure it continues to go forward. But you're right about Modern Sky. What we've tried to create is a non-genre driven label. Our love and passion is just music that we think is great. And then beyond that, trying to cross-fertilize, or, you know, so not all sleeping in the same beds, of course, but then working together and supporting each other and so on. So Lathams or Jamie or Red Rum, they'll take some of our other acts on tour with them and so on, and give them a leg up, really. So we're really kind of growing within, you know, helping each other grow inside the whole thing, really.
No, I think
family side is very important.
Yeah, and I think it's all, as you're dead right, as all different ingredients, and, you know, includes all of the smaller music venues. We're all part of that boast of, you know, we're a music city.
Yeah, brand Liverpool.
You know, and I think we're proud. And this is a theme when we're doing these podcasts. Even, you know, we're talking to people from Liverpool based, and people from all over the world with Cavern connections. But there is, for us that are from Liverpool, it is that we're ambassadors for the city.
Yeah.
You know, wherever we go, and in our case, we're lucky it's through music.
Yeah, and it's that badge, you know. I always find it interesting when you're with people from different parts of the world, and they'll say, "Oh, where you from?" They'll say, "Oh, I'm from England," or whatever. You know, because they're proud of that, because maybe they're from somewhere. I never say. We always say just from Liverpool.
Yeah, no. Well,
and if they don't know where it is, say, well, you need to do your homework.
Absolutely, yeah, it is that. It's the
But 9 times out of 10, 9.5 times out of 10, people will always know where you're from.
So it's got Modern Skies now. The US. That's in the last few years. Is that kicking in?
I'm doing the US side of the business, but I guess what I do, because Modern Sky in China has over 3,500 songs in its repertoire. And a lot of those songs are Chinese hip hop, Chinese guitar bands, Chinese folk music. But when I say folk music, not traditional folk music, these are kids that are writing music that's very against the government in some ways,
right.
but they're writing it in very symbolic ways, a bit like Polish music was during the Cold War era, and Russian music. So they can't outwardly criticize the government, but they do it through colours, or through symbols. It's very dangerous. Some of them have gone to prison for it.
Really?
It's that dangerous. And so we've got this amazing catalogue of music that does billions of streams in China, but very little outside. So I now manage that outside of China. And I've done a publishing deal in the US, and I've done a record deal in the US for that music. And so what my main job is, or what our team's main job is now, is to exploit that music. So we make a lot of money now syncing Chinese hip hop or Chinese music into Netflix movies, that's good money for us every year.
Absolutely.
And because we've got the biggest catalogue of that music, we're the go-to company now for Chinese hip hop or Chinese whatever.
It's ridiculous how you've ended up doing this. And
I know, it's insane.
It's from Eric's to this. It's what's the next big thing? What's the next big thing coming out of Liverpool? The next band that's coming out of Liverpool, or Modern Sky? Who's going to be the next biggie? I think two things. Next big thing for us. I think going back to what the next big thing for Modern Sky. What I would love to do, I would love to be. We're working on a project at the moment where I can't name the artist who it is because I've not signed the deal yet, but it's a very big hip-hop artist from the UK, and I've got a huge hip-hop artist from China, and I'm getting them to do a song together, half in Mandarin, half in English, to try and break the UK hip-hop artist into China. Okay, that's
and
interesting.
I want to break a Chinese artist in the West. I'd love to do that.
Yeah. Because
I just think that that way of the American way of take our music, but we don't want anything to do with you, is not us really. I like the family way of China, really. It's really taught me a lot about business and stuff, particularly Shen Li Wei is my business partner over there. So that's an ambition I want to do before I hang my boots up. And as well as break all the other artists we work with over here.
Yeah.
Jamie Webster, for example, just continue from strength to strength.
Isn't he? Yeah.
But then I guess of all the artists we've got coming through, we've just signed, I talked to them about them earlier, a young act called Yiloi, which is Mandarin for two girls. And these kids they're Scousers, they're from Liverpool, born and bred here. Their mum came from Vietnam when she was very, very young with her mum. And so these kids are amazing. They're like punk rockers, true punk rockers. Their dad, who's a bit of a Liverpool legend himself, got him into music at a very early age. So they're not playing it being a punk. They really do believe it. And I think they're very young, 17 and 15 years of age. I think they could, in the next 2 years, I'd love to break them.
You showed me a little bit before we started recording this, and they look and sound fantastic.
Yeah.
You said the Ramones. You'll have to show them. There's a famous picture of the Ramones outside the Cavern, opposite Eric's, when they played the Eric's. Have you seen that picture?
Outside the Cavern?
Yeah, it's when the Ramones played in 77 or whatever. And they turned up and the Cavern the warehouses had been demolished. But because they were huge Beatles fans.
That's right, yeah.
There's really good photos, iconic photos of them standing opposite Eric's on the site of the original Cavern where the doorway is.
In fact,
Paul's showing you the picture there.
Is that outside the Cavern?
Is opposite Eric's, that picture was shown. You can see this online. It's out there.
You sent me that?
Yeah, and that's above where the Cavern was, right opposite Eric's. And when you showed me this video before, and they look great, I knew they were going to.
Yeah.
You had said about them. I said these are going to look great, and hopefully we're going to try and get them.
But isn't it weird? So the Ramones, we go all the way back again to Seymour Stein.
Yeah.
The first band he ever signed.
Of course,
to Sire Records. His wife was managing him. Mandy Steen was managing him at the time with oh God, I've forgotten his name. But anyway, managing at the time with another friend, Danny Fields.
Who I met at Sound City, New York.
At Sound City with Andrew Lou Goldham, because Danny interviewed Andrew
That's
Lou Goldham.
That's right, yeah. I think we sponsored that particular section of it.
For me meeting Andrew Lou Goldham, for meeting Danny Fields, meeting everyone was Seymour Stein. Seymour Stein got into the music business, but his love of blues music, but his love of the Beatles.
Okay.
So if he hadn't have heard the Beatles, his story would never have happened. If he hadn't have done that, you talk about sliding doors, I'd have certainly, my little story that's in all this, I'd have never met Seymour, I'd have never done the things I've done and all that. So it's just so strange how the Beatles were the cause of a lot of all of this.
Absolutely. I'm bringing it right back to the Ramones and this new act that hopefully we're going to do something with them at the Cavern and try and support them there. I texted you last night late and said, I forgot to say, on all of our guests, we're doing a Cavern Podcast Spotify playlist.
Yes.
And we need 3. This is going to be hard for you. As you answered me at 6 o'clock this morning. I don't know if you were up or if you were.
I get up at 6 every morning.
Yeah, because you texted me the other week at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, I always get up at 6. Clockwork, even at the weekends.
I'm usually getting up for an old man's wee at 6 o'clock. But you're up and
I have a few of them early.
You're up and at it. But I text you saying, you need to choose 3 favourite songs by 3 Liverpool artists that we can add to our playlist. So what's number 3?
Well, here's the thing, before I do it, you're right, we could all choose hundreds of songs. And I thought I could get really clever with it and choose some obscure B-sides and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, no, why do that? It's just play your cards as you play your cards. So there's 3 acts that I think my get out on this is because they've had a huge impact on my life, really. So one of the first bands I ever saw at Eric's when I got into music was the Bunnymen. And so the Bunnymen, you could list, a whole raft of tracks, but Killing Moon, which would be a song that it's my go-to.
Yeah.
If ever it's someone who has never heard the Bunnymen, I say, listen to this.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a there are certain songs that are perfect. There's no fat in them. There's no fat in that song whatsoever. So that would be number 3 or number 1, whichever way. They're not ranked in any order. Let's call it number 3. Number 2, again, because they were such great friends, and particularly Carl Hunter, from the farm.
Good mates.
Me and Carl have been friends since we were kids. I love every bone in his body. I've just signed one of his bands, a band called Quayside.
I'm keeping an eye on them. Yeah, absolutely.
Listen to this track, Angeline. It's a perfect pop song. This kid is like Edith Piaf meets Sting meets Lee Mavers, really. It's unbelievable. He's got a voice from nowhere. He's got this like little flutter on the end. But anyway, we digress. But Carl Hunter and Peter and all the lads from the farm, because again, my first venture into the business, really, they gave me the chance of doing that, and I learnt a lot working with the farm, good and bad, by the way. and again, I think a perfect song for this time of year, particularly with what's going on in the world altogether now, by the farm, I think is just a beautiful song.
Yeah.
And then again, bringing us all the way back to someone who has become a beloved friend. He's much younger than me, but he's much older in years, and has brought it, for me, just, put what we do on the map, put everything we do on the map, and those happy accidents. And again, for his song that he wrote about our beautiful city, Jamie Webster, with This Place.
Well, when you were saying that, I was thinking, where's this going? Yeah, absolutely. A perfect choice.
Yeah, and there are my reasons behind them, because I could choose another 50 songs.
Yeah. Well, I knew when I sent that last night, and you said, "Oh, thanks for that." No pressure sort of thing. Great choices of music. We're going to wrap things up now. Let you crack on and go and sign another band and make them. I will be giving you a copy of my album before you go there. That's currently not available on any channels of Modern Sky. It's available in the centre aisle of the Aldi. But Dave Pichilingi, thank you very much for coming on the Cavern Podcast.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
it's nice catching up.
We go back.
Felt like a catch up.
Yeah, well, it is as well. It's I mean, we chat over the years, and there's usually a pint in the middle of us. Yeah. We're actually drinking tea at the moment. But Dave, thanks very much from all of us here at the Cavern, and thanks for coming to the Cavern Podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks again, John.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cavern Podcast, and we hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we can't do this without you, the audience. So please like, share, and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, Get involved on our socials and tell us your Cavern stories. See you next time on the Cavern Podcast.